So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Luxembourg. The agenda for today, today's meeting starts with us. And this is a first, as the auditors, we always come at the end, but I think we can manage this time. First of all, we would like to thank Interact for this invitation to present our special report on Interreg cooperation, as this report concerns the Interreg programs and related EU services, and this seminar was a good venue to present it. So it's a good opportunity to ask questions and have a fruitful discussion at the end of the presentation. Of course, this file I will present today is available to those interested. We have cooperated with almost half of you, either in person or through exchange of emails. So I'm glad that you can put a face on the email addresses. Niels Brokop was the principal manager for this audit and myself the head of task. Our team also consisted of another 10 auditors because of the big sample and the language needs. Next slide, please. This is the agenda for this session. We start with our scope and approach to audit this subject matter, and then we continue with the 3 recommendations of the report. We will present the audit findings and conclusions that led to these recommendations. As the subject of the seminar today is about the selection of projects, we will focus more on recommendation 2, on the prioritization and award of support based on merit using scores. We will also present examples on the selection procedures, one good, 1 weak, on projects with clear or questionable cross-border character, and conclusions of other ECA reports that dealt with selection processes, but which had samples from the mainstream programs. We will close the discussion with the conclusions of the Council of this report. Next slide, please. Our report was published the 1st of July 2021, and it was presented at the Parliament mid-July and at the Council mid-September. Of the 3 strands of cooperation for Interreg 5 2014-2020, the 107 programs and the 10 billion total budget, our audit population was, there is an animation if you can press once. Our audit population was the 53 programs of strand A, internal borders, of 6.3 billion value. Once more, the animation. There is another audit, as Pascal mentioned, on Interreg, running currently at ECA. It is expected to be published by end of 2022, but it concerns the ENI programs of strand A. Next slide, please. The audit question of this audit was whether the Commission and the Member States addressed effectively the cross-border regions challenges in the Interreg VA internal border cooperation programs. To do this, we examined whether the program authorities analyzed and prioritized the challenges to concentrate the cooperation programs where they would have most impact, whether the cooperation programs were designed with a coherent intervention logic and in synergy with the mainstream programs of the adjacent regions, measuring the cross-border effect, and whether the Commission's guidance was helpful for the cross-border regions concerning their challenges, the effects of the COVID-19 crisis, and the preparation for the 21-27 period. Next slide, please. We had a big sample with high audit coverage, and in total we examined 23 of the 53 internal borders cooperation programs. The selection of the programs was done on a random basis with minor adjustments at the end to make sure that all 28 member states at that time were involved, at least once the sample. Our sample represented 43% of the funding for Interreg VA internal borders and 27% of the whole budget for Interreg 14-20 period. In addition, for all 23 cooperation programs, we selected 2 mainstream programs from the adjacent regions and compared their focus and assessed the level of synergy in addressing the cross-border challenges. Main criteria for selecting the mainstream programs were population size, level of financial support, size of the area covered, and most importantly, the extent of shared investment priorities. When COVID-19 hit in March 2020, we were at the peak of our audit fieldwork, but we still could add one more module in our work related to the extent to which program authorities made use of the flexibility and simplification possibilities offered by the 2 CRI2 initiatives. Finally, it's worth mentioning that we cleared the audit findings twice, once through the common clearing process and the second time for the conclusions and recommendations that were addressed to the examined program authorities. They had to reply, you had to reply, whether you agree, partially agree, or did not agree with our recommendations. The summary of the replies, as well as the most common reasons for partial or non-acceptance, are listed in Annex 6 of our report. Next slide, please. To give you some more information on the sample, we did 10 simple desk reviews, 10 extended desk reviews, and 3 visits on the spot. We were planning initially 4 visits. However, due to COVID-19 travel restrictions, we were not able to visit the program of Romania, Bulgaria that we examined finally through an extended desk review. We list on the slide the items we checked for each type of examination. For the 10 simple desk reviews, we examined the cross-border challenges, the SWOT or the socioeconomic analysis, the intervention logic, the focus of the program in comparison to the 2 mainstreams from the adjacent regions, the indicators used, the process for assessing the cross-border character of the projects, the process for coordinating with other ECA funds, the position and border orientation papers, and the preparation stage for the 21-27 period. In addition to the above, for another 10 programs, we examined the calls for proposals, the selection process of projects, and the approach followed for attracting project proposals, whether this was top-down or bottom-up. Finally, for the 3 audits on the spot, we examined 4 projects in each case, and that we visited on the spot, and the cross-border character of these projects. For the program of Romania, Bulgaria, we examined the 4 projects we had selected beforehand through a desk review. Next slide, please. Our first recommendation concerned the better focus of the cooperation programs. It was the result of our work on the intervention logic, focus, and cross-border character that we did for all 23 sample programs. Some general remarks we mention on the spot on these issues. The first is that program authorities can address only few of the challenges with the resources available. Also, the challenges of the mainstream and Interreg programs are more or less the same, with the exemption of the administrative cooperation and the language barrier. We noted that there is a significant land overlap between Interreg and the mainstream programs, and that in most of the cases for the Interreg project decision, the contribution at national level is required. Finally, for the 21-27 period, there are budget cuts, but also less thematic concentration. With our examination, we found a sound intervention logic, starting from the definition of challenges, selection of priority axes, thematic and specific objectives, investment priorities, and calls for proposals. So the backbone of the programs made sense and was clear-cut of what needs to be achieved. The weaknesses were found at the implementation phase. For 14 of the 23 programs, we identified overlaps and no clear demarcation between the mainstream and the cooperation programs. And for the 8 of the 16 projects, the cross-border character was questionable, especially for the touristic projects, the majority of which were mirror projects. These findings led to the conclusions of no clear demarcation, as both sources of funding could finance the same kind of operations, and the need to increase the added value of EU operations. From the above evidence, we formulated our first recommendation on the better focus of the cooperation programs. We proposed to the Interreg program authorities to focus on the different types of projects and coordinate with the mainstream authorities of the adjacent regions. 14 of the 23 accepted the recommendation, 5 partially accepted, and 4 did not accept. We also proposed to the Commission to insist and require that the projects between mainstream and the Interreg programs are complementary. Next slide, please. Our second recommendation concerns the prioritization and award support to projects based on merit and using scores. Project selection was examined for the 10 extended desk reviews and the 3 audits on the spot. 2 general remarks with which we started our analysis. Interreg's contracting rate has not been of a major concern. End of December 2020, it was at 102%. And also, scarce resources mean that few projects can be selected. This means that you have enough projects, but you have limited funds. In terms of strategy, we confirm the alignment of the cooperation programs to the legal requirements. They included information on the type of actions, beneficiaries, principle of selection, and what was required following the regulation. However, in terms of implementation, we found several weaknesses. The use of the bottom-up approach, in the sense that projects might not address directly the needs of the region. The selection was based on a qualitative assessment that might lead to less transparency and a difficult decision-making, and no ranking of projects when sending the list to the monitoring committee. These weaknesses in implementation were the basis for formulating our conclusion that projects are not ranked in terms of merit to ensure that best proposals for funding are considered, and that no minimum thresholds were used to guarantee the cross-border character and address the most pressing challenges of the region. Thus, we recommended to program authorities to select those projects that best address the challenges of the regions and the objectives of the programs, and to do this by using a system of merit in the project appraisal process and proposing for funding projects these that achieve a minimum threshold also in the appraisal of the cross-border character. 14 of the 23 authorities accepted the recommendation, 6 partially accepted, and 3 did not accept. Next slide, please. In the report, we have in box 6 a good and a weak example regarding the selection procedures. The first case is a transparent, structured one and works as follows. Participating regions develop a list of experts in each area of support covered by the program. Each project is assessed by 4 external experts, 2 from its member state. 2 are from the regions where the project partners are based, and 2 from other regions covered by the program. The cross-border effect is assessed by the 2 external experts from the regions of the project partners and 1 staff member from the Joint Secretariat. The cross-border cooperation is evaluated by 2 staff members of the Joint Secretariat and 1 from its member state. Projects to be included in the list of potential projects for co-financing must achieve an overall minimum threshold of 70% of the total score, including a minimum of 70% in some specific areas of the evaluation. Finally, the Joint Secretariat ranks the projects in terms of points gained and submits them to the Monitoring Committee for selection. The second example is a more vague selection procedure. It is carried out on a continuous basis without competitive calls. The program authorities do not score their project applications, but assess their adequacy against a few qualitative criteria. A project proposal is rejected as inadequate when the applicant has provided incomplete or insufficient responses to the requirements. And as a result, through this procedure, it is not possible to rank the project based on their merit and priority. And there is also no assurance that authorities will be able to select transparently the best projects. Next slide, please. In the report, we have in box 4 a good and a weak example regarding projects with a clear or questionable cross-border character. The clear cross-border character example concerns the cross-border cooperation of police units. All 8 police units in the 2 regions of the program applied for funding to increase coordination in combating drug-related crime. Project activities included the purchase of equipment for revealing drugs, such as spectrometers, common police patrols, joint trainings for officers, including language training, and information campaigns to teachers and parents on drug substances and equipment used. This project brought the 8 police units in closer cooperation and had a genuine cross-border character. The second example is the opposite, a project with a weak cross-border character. It is more what we call a mirror project, where 2 beneficiaries across the border file a common project application, but there is no link between the 2 projects that justifies taking money from Interreg. The project concerned the revitalization of the pavilions of a zoo and the facilities of a touristic attraction. 2 touristic attractions, one in each country around 75 kilometers apart, applied for funding to modernize their facilities and to design a joint marketing campaign. They did modernize the facilities. However, the deliverables that would justify the cross-border character, meaning the advertisement on their websites of the establishments of each other partner, and the common ticketing system were not implemented. Thus, there was no cross-border character underpinning the project. Next slide, please. In the past, we have several times examined the selection procedures for mainstream projects, and 2 recent reports, a briefing paper of June 2019 and a special report of 2018, refer to them. The first defines the concept of EU added value as the value resulting from an EU intervention, which is additional to the value that would otherwise have been created by member state action alone. It also concluded that programs which do not add EU value, are unlikely to be an efficient and effective use of the taxpayers' money. The second report looked more on the outputs and results of ERDF and TSF projects, highlighted that the setup of programs is now more results-oriented than in the past, with a stronger intervention logic and an extensive use of indicators. However, the selection of projects is not yet fully results-oriented. Also, the monitoring is still more outputs-oriented. We go to recommendation 3, next slide. Our third recommendation concerns the Commission and relates to the use of indicators. It comes as a result of our work for all 23 programs we examined. First, two general remarks. The use of common output indicators facilitates the aggregation of data for the cohesion policy funds. The use of surveys for measuring the result indicators may lead to non-objective results. In terms of strategy, again, we were generally satisfied. We confirmed that the specific objectives were based on smart criteria that followed the intervention logic, and that output and result indicators were generally measurable. But we had again some issues at the level of implementation in terms of relevance, achievability, and data availability. Concerning relevance, some indicators did not reflect the aims of the specific objective that the project addressed, or could not capture the cross-border effect. Concerning achievability, some indicators did not strike the right balance between being achievable and ambitious. And in terms of data, there are limited available data in cross-border regional statistics. There are also differences in data collection methods between member states and insufficient cross-border statistical coordination. These were also our conclusions: the weaknesses in relevance and achievability of the output and result indicators, and the weaknesses in cross-border data availability, collection, and coordination. Our recommendation was addressed to the Commission this time, especially concerning the use of indicators that capture the cross-border effect of the project. Our recommendation was twofold. From the one hand, the Commission to promote the selection of common output and result indicators relevant to the types of actions, thus capable of measuring the achievements and effects of the cross-border projects. And from the other hand, where common indicators cannot be used, the Commission to work with the program authorities to assess the suitability of those indicators selected. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in the beginning, we also examined the level of use of the two CRE2 initiatives on flexibility and simplification possibilities because of the COVID-19 pandemic. In total, for cohesion, 241 COVID-19 related program amendments in 186 programs coming from 24 member states, including Interreg programs, were submitted. 40 Interreg programs used CRE2 and CRE2 plus simplification possibilities, and less than 1% of the projects from the 3 programs examined on the spot, including Romania, Bulgaria, had to be stopped or suspended because of the crisis. From this analysis, we concluded that program authorities made use of the measures available by the CRE2 and CRE2 plus initiatives, and very few projects were suspended or cancelled. However, the effect of the crisis was visible in the timing of the implementation of the projects. Finally, we examined Commission's contribution in the implementation of the Interreg programs. We spotted 3 main issues. First, there was a limited guidance for the 14-20 period. Second, there was more guidance and support for the preparation of the 21-27 period. There was a series of initiatives to assist member states in the identification of the cross-border challenges. And third, the Commission proposals for the new regulations were published in due time in May 2018. However, the negotiations between the Parliament and the Council lasted longer than expected. From these, we concluded that the Commission's guidance improved over the last two program periods, and that the delay for adopting the legal basis affected the cooperation programs and prevented the smooth start for the new program period. And we go to the last slide. In October 2018, the Council adopted its conclusions on our report. It acknowledged our three recommendations on the better focus of the programs, the need to prioritize and award support based on merit and using scores, and the use of indicators that capture the cross-border effect. And broadly shares our observations, in particular that coordination between the cooperation and mainstream programs is already tackled by the existing legal requirements. Representatives of the institutions of the mainstream programs are present in the Interreg Monitoring Committee's meeting, but considers their presence could be further enhanced. Projects are prioritized and support is awarded based on merit using scores, although a merit approach leads to a more transparent and clear selection process, is of the view that this may not always capture the added value of innovative projects. Thus, it could be complemented with a qualitative assessment for each project. And here we come to the end of our presentation. I would like to thank you for your attention.